is. Before we look at it, I want to remind you today to be in prayer for Lonnie and Cindy Hazlett and Kevin Cooper. So Isaiah chapter 26 is mainly a song of praise to the Lord, talking about his salvation, the goodness that he's shown to his people in the past and the goodness that he's going to show to his people in the future. Remember in chapter 24, we talked about the coming judgment of God, how God is going to pour his wrath out on the whole world in that time when he judges wickedness once and for all, and he does away with it. But we also talked about the remnant of people he's going to save for himself. And Pastor Mike talked about that in chapter 25 as it began to talk about God's promises and how he wants to do good to his people. And that carries on in chapter 26. We're singing about the salvation of God and how he, in his mercy, has saved us and made us righteous. It talks in the beginning about the city of God. And, I think about that, and it certainly makes me think about the city of God we see in Revelations, that city that only the righteous enter into it, right? There's no place in there for the wicked or for the defiled. They're sent away into eternal judgment. This city that he's talking about here is not like a normal city. It's not a city that will fade away like all the other cities of the earth that are built on their ambition and their pride. It's not like cities we built. It's an eternal city founded on the eternal rock. And we know the eternal rock, the foundation, is Jesus Christ. It's singing about those promises, the eternal promises of God. For me, I think and I don't even know why, but it's just these two verses stood out to me in this chapter. Verses 8 and 9. And I think that these two verses talk about the heart of the righteous person. And we know that God has declared us righteous through Jesus Christ. And yet we still live here in our flesh, and we don't always live righteously, even though we've been declared to be righteous. But God's making us righteous. He's transforming us into that practical righteousness where we live out life in the way that Christ would. He lives through us. And so as I read verses 8 through 9, and I see this heart of a righteous person, today just reminds me to pray, God, do this in my heart. Give me that heart of a righteous person. It says in verse 8, Lord, we show our trust in you by obeying your laws. Not by just saying we trust in you, but by committing our ways to you, acknowledging you, and letting you make our pathway straight, in what we actually do and how we live our lives. That's a prayer request for me today. Lord, that I would actually live in obedience to your laws and show my trust in you, and not just call myself a Christian or a follower of Christ. It's easy to say those things and easy to get the lingo down, but when we truly trust in God, we'll live by them. And we know he's going to take care of us when we do that. Our heart's desire, continues in verse 8, is to glorify your name. It's my desire to glorify your name. That's not the desire of the world, is it? The desire of the world is to glorify itself, to be its own God, to have its own way. The desire of a righteous person is to glorify God, and yet I know if I'm honest with myself, that's not always my desire, because I live in this flesh, and sometimes I desire other things, and honestly, sometimes I desire to gratify myself, to glorify myself, to do what I want to do. The heart of a righteous person says, it's my desire to glorify your name. God, give me that desire today. Grow that desire in my heart today. Above all else, to glorify your name. Verse 9, all night long I search for you. In the morning I earnestly seek for God. For only when you come to judge the earth will people learn what is right. The world doesn't care about what God thinks. They care about what they think and what they want. And yet the heart of a righteous person says, I look for you, God, all night. I get up early in the morning. I think about you. I want you. Is God far away from any of us? No, absolutely not. Especially if we know Christ, God dwells within us. And yet there is that thing about the heart of a righteous person that they want to pursue God. We're the bride of Christ. And in that relationship, that we have this love for God, that we want to pursue him more and more. And I confess, I know it's not always my heart. My heart sometimes is to pursue many other things. And it may not be something that's necessarily considered wicked, but it's something other than God. And so I read this today. I see these 3 different prayer requests that God, you'd help me live in obedience to your laws to show that I truly trust you. Lord, that you'd make it my heart's desire to glorify your name above all else. And God, you'd give me a heart to pursue you. I am thankful for this passage today. If God spoke something out of it to you, I'd ask you to leave us a message on Facebook, on YouTube, and remember to minister to one another. Thank you guys for listening.